The Fool's Gallery presents Chapter 7, The Lonely Dead. Taken from the journals of Max Landau. Year 148 DD. 37 days into our voyage. We stumbled through the alleys of Lastport, Willas supporting me. His wound was grievous, but he did not falter, did not cry out, did not show a single ounce of pain. I tried to ignore the glint of amber wrapped around his wrist, the teeth of the spider injecting my friend with an anti-pain serum. I had not wanted Willas to ever find out about the spider, but I saw no other path before me, and so there we were. It wasn't until we were good and truly lost that I realized it was the morning of the third day, the day we were supposed to set sail, a deadline that, if missed, the first mate had promised we would be left behind. I told Willas, and we doubled our pace. Though we knew the endless ocean was terrible, staying in Lastport was a fate more horrible still. At least in the ocean there was a chance of survival. A small chance, but a chance nonetheless. Down alleyways we stumbled until finally we caught a glimmer of the ocean, far off and to our right. Together we moved towards it. My cuts were beginning to bleed again, and my vision softened with them, but Willas did not let go. He supported me down countless alleys, never feeling the exhaustion, pain, or panic that was consuming me. He was once again saving my life. And then finally, we found ourselves on the dock. I could feel the sun's warmth on my face, and there, still moored, was the Alabaster Queen. I nearly cried at the sight of it. We had without a doubt missed our deadline, but there it was, waiting for us. And as we approached, we could see a single figure sitting on the dock, a corked bottle of brandy at her side. It was the captain, stone sober for the first time since I had met her. I collapsed at her feet. Willas still stood, but his body shook. The captain raised her eyebrows. "You two had quite a night, it seems," she said. Willas promised to tell her all about it, but we needed medical attention on the ship. He grabbed me and began to pull me towards the gangplank, but the captain stepped in front of us. "The only way I'm letting you back on my ship is if you give back what you stole," she said. "This is my ship," Willas stated, proving that the spider did not improve your intelligence. The captain gave him a pitying look. "What if we don't have it?" Willas asked. The captain shrugged. "Then I guess you should make yourselves comfortable here." Impatiently, I shoved the whole knapsack past Willas and into the captain's hands. She took it and pulled out the golden flag. A slight smile appeared on her face, and she stepped aside. "Welcome aboard the Alabaster Queen, gentlemen," she said, and took a swig of brandy. We walked up the gangplank, pausing only for a second for me to insist that we hadn't stole it, but the captain cut me off. "Oh, I know. Mookie told me what happened." Before I could ask who Mookie was, Willas pulled me up the ship, where Jenna fussily took us below deck to patch us up. I'm ashamed to say I screamed and cried and bled a lot as Jenna sewed my cuts back together. Willas, however, simply stared at the spider, not seeming to notice the needle and thread punching holes in his skin. I slept for the next 2 days, and when I woke, we were once again at sea, with Lastport dissolved into memory. I shuffled on deck, my cuts still aching. The moon was full, and the familiar mist of the ocean wrapped itself around me in a comforting hug. The captain was sleeping at the wheel, and Willas was leaning against the railing, staring off into the water. I leaned next to him and silently stared out into the waves, where the figure of Michael stood, his arm eternally outstretched. Strangely, it was nice to see him again. Michael's ghost could always be relied upon. I almost waved back, but stopped myself in front of Willas. "Thank you," I said. "You saved me again." I smiled and looked at him, but Willas did not look back. Instead, he rubbed his wrist, where lay 2 perfectly circular scabs where the spider had bitten down. A great unease fell over me. A long silence stretched out between us. I felt that Willas was choosing his next words carefully, but he needn't have. I knew what he was going to say before he said it. You know what I see when I look out there into the waves? I see him. Silver gilded armor, crushed, destroyed, helm bleeding red. He stands there in the waves, staring at me, his hand in the air. Every night I see him. Every night he's there to remind me that it's my fault. But the night we got back on the Queen, I came out on deck and looked out into the waves for my brother. And do you know what I saw? I saw nothing. Just waves. Why do you think I saw nothing, Max? I did not answer, though I knew exactly why. Willas looked down at his wrist and the 2 scabs that condemned me. Harold, the man that killed my brother, was covered in wounds when he died. We stripped him down, trying to figure out which one killed him. Honestly, any of them could have claimed his life in the end. But it was the 2 wounds that could not have been fatal that were of the most interest to me. Finally, Willas turned to look at me. 2 perfectly circular cuts on his wrist. The healers were baffled at what they could be, and so I wrote them off as an unanswerable mystery. Where could they have come from? What part did they play in my brother's death? I thought I would never find the answers to these mysteries. So imagine my surprise when I removed your spider to find the exact same cuts on my wrist. Would you care to explain that, my friend? I looked away from him. The moment I had dreaded for weeks had finally come. My mind raced for an explanation, some clever lie that would save me, but as it had since the event, my imagination came up short. In the end, I only had the truth to fall back on. And this is the truth. By the time of Ferris Darrowbell's death, I had been in Sados for over a year. I had not made contact with Willas in all that time. In our childhood, Willas and I had dipped our toes into the darkness of the city, always skipping back to our parents when we got in too much trouble. But every time we went back, I stayed a bit longer, got a bit more dirt on me, liked it a bit too much. But Willas always seemed to dance away clean, where I began to resemble the place more and more. I gained many underworld contacts and began to gamble on pit fights, wasting thousands chasing small thrills, and always coming home stinking of whatever gutter I slept in. And then my mother cut me off. Money became tight. I published a book about my time in the gutter, and that allowed me to live a little. But once those funds ran out, I returned again and again to the darkness, until I was consumed entirely. My ventures became darker and darker, bleaker and bleaker. My old friends left me, too scared of getting mud on them to stay by my side. After several months, when I looked in the mirror, I saw a criminal staring back. But even then, I knew I didn't belong. The people I told my stories about always saw me for what I was. A rich kid, slumming it with them by choice, not by necessity. I belonged to neither world. Too dirty for court, too clean for the mud. And then I met Michael. He was the son of a merchant who had set up shop in the city. He was tall and handsome, and with the largest appetite for vice that I had ever seen. And perhaps most importantly, Michael had money, and I knew what to do with it. The setup was simple. I would show Michael the door, and Michael's money would let us both walk through it, digging us deeper and deeper into the underworld. It was by these means that we found our way to betting on tournaments, both jousting and the duel. And then I read about an artifact that could dull pain to nothing. It was called the Amber Widow. It made you fight longer, harder. Exhaustion and pain could never defeat you. In a sword fight underneath the sun with full armor on, it was exhaustion and heat that were the true reasons you lost. We found a fighter. Not too big, not too imposing, from a small family. Though skilled in arms, he had neither an impressive name nor an impressive record. Many would bet against him. His name was Harry Vestemir. Harold. He was going to make us rich. We entered him in the lists, posting the entrance fee that he would never have been able to afford himself. Harry fought his way through the tournament, taking such damage in each bout that we were afraid he wouldn't make it. But the spider did its work, and he never fell. God, we made so much money. Michael wanted to continue. He wanted us to win in the finals, but I called it. Though Harry's run had been impressive, it was still believable. He won each round by the skin of his teeth, taking so much damage that the crowd could barely believe he was still standing. They would never believe he could beat Ferris. And if he did, in the final, the court would smell a cheater, and we would be caught. I reasoned that we had made enough money, and withheld the spider for the final. I thought I was playing it safe, making the smart play. But there was one hitch in the plan. Harry disagreed. I remember he was sweating and feverish. It seemed he needed the spider venom. It was something I shrugged off. He was sure to lose no matter what. What did it matter what state he was in? But then the match began, and something happened to Harry. He became a wild beast. It wasn't that he didn't feel pain, it was that every blow dealt against him seemed to make him stronger, more rabid, a beast in armor. Ferris didn't stand a chance. Ferris died. Harry was imprisoned, and Michael panicked. We were in my rooms. Michael was sure Harry would turn on us. He wanted to come clean. They would be more lenient if we confessed. His father would protect us. He was sure of it. I disagreed, but knew he was right. I couldn't have my mother, the court, or Willas knowing that I was responsible. I couldn't have them knowing what I had become. Michael moved to the door and I stopped him. He hit me, and I grabbed a quill sharpener from my desk and jammed it into Michael's throat. That night, Harry suffered a heart attack in his cell. He died, unable to turn on us. But Michael was still dead. I had still killed him. I spent most of our winnings getting rid of his body. And then I drank myself into oblivion, waiting to be arrested. But it wasn't the law who came for me. It was Willas. He offered me a job. It didn't matter that it was on a ship to nowhere. It didn't matter that I was responsible for his brother's death. The only thing that mattered was that I could escape. I accepted, thinking I was leaving it all behind me. I was a fool. When I was done speaking, a silence ruled us. And Willas nodded slowly. You're lucky, he said. Lucky that a few days ago, I learned I didn't have what it takes to kill a man. Then he turned and walked away. I felt our friendship die in that moment. I stood on the deck, never feeling more alone. But when I turned back to the ocean, Michael was still there. And behind him stood a figure in perfect silver armor, his helm a twisted, bloody mess, his feet resting on the breathing waves. The Endless Ocean was written and directed by Keenan Ellis. Ambient sound designed by Sword Coast Soundscapes. Check out our other podcast, The Phone Booth, which explores a world in which 99% of every human being on the planet has a superpower. Also, if you like our shows and want to help us make more, please consider becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/foolsgallery. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week on The Endless Ocean.